Welcome back, everybody, to the Fantasy Stock Exchange. We have our first interview of the to-be-named interview series. Couldn't think of a name yet, so I gotta get that brainstorming. We got Chris Benevides from the Commish Fantasy Football Podcast on the dock here. How you feeling, Chris?
What's up, my man? I am doing very well. Just trying to, do the social distancing thing as best as anyone can do social distancing. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
awesome. We are talking more than 6 feet away or meters or whatever the distance is. So we're doing our part for sure. So let's
Yeah.
let's get right into it here.
Cool.
Obviously, you have the Commish Fantasy Football Podcast is a podcast. Yeah, they're on Twitter, social media, all that. But the big question is, well, one, how did you guys get started, and why fantasy football?
Yeah. So we got started, I guess, in a bit of a unique way. It's kind of a confluence of sorts. So we have a very unique, and I know everyone thinks that they have a very unique fantasy football league. But when I talk to people about my fantasy football league, they tell me I have a very unique fantasy football league.
Hmm.
And so we started to think, all right, well, that's pretty interesting. And are there ways that we can, basically record what we do in our fantasy football league and put that into the world, and maybe that's just some entertainment for people, and what they think, and not to go into too much detail, but maybe I'll give your listeners just like a kind of an overview of what that league structure is like. So we have a 12 or at this point 11 person league. We only do points. We don't do head to head. So basically, it's one versus all. We have it's basically a 2 quarterback league, quarterback premium league. Quarterbacks get half points per throwing completion, which makes the quarterback premium much more,
Yep.
viable in a sense. We also play defensive players, and our point structure is geared such that defenses on any given day, if they have a good day, will earn like 50 points, right? And so what that does is we try to mirror the way that the NFL actually is played, and so defenses can totally take over a game. Fantasy football point structure should also be geared that way. So we do everything in our power to give the point system, or at least to have the point system mirrored such a way that it mirrors the NFL. Now, the other thing that makes our system unique is the way we have money. So we have individual meetings on Wednesday nights. There is no waiver wire. You don't. There's nothing on ESPN that you can go to. You can't put claims on. You don't have this fake $100 that you can bid on players. We bid real money on Wednesday nights. So, for example, Lucas, if you and I, you said you had Matt Ryan last year, and let's just say I had Cam Newton, okay? In the midst of like week 6, if you and I both needed quarterbacks, we would put in the names of the quarterbacks that we wanted to take, and we would both bid on those quarterbacks, just like
Hmm.
an auction, right? It's an auction draft, right? In
Yep.
a sense, or an auction bid, but we're bidding on real money. So we've had guys go upwards of 150, 200, $300 on any given Wednesday night. This year we set the record for when Drew Brees came back. He went for $501.
That's crazy.
Absolutely,
That's insane.
absolutely shattered our previous record, which was like, I think it was like Tony Romo back in like 2012. He went for like
Oh no.
$120. And let's just say, after seeing records being broken, it never ends up the way you think. So, yeah. So Drew Brees, let's just say, wasn't worth the 501. So
Yeah.
so that's one way. So that's one way. The other thing that we do that's really interesting from a money structure is that because it's all against one, everybody every week puts in $5, and so it doesn't matter where you're placed in seating, you have a chance to win. It's a $55 total every week if you score the most points that week.
Okay.
So it gives some incentive for people in last place, 11th, 10th, 8th, whatever, 9th, if they're scrapping for that last playoff spot, to always continuously win money over the course of the 13 weeks that we play. And then we obviously
Mm.
go into a the playoff structures. The playoff structure, what's interesting about this is that all the money that we bid in throughout the season is what goes into the fantasy football pot. So I kind of just gave you a long synopsis
Mm.
of what I guess makes our league interesting. But then on top of that, because of the Wednesday meetings, we have a lot of interesting characters that have a lot of interesting things to say. So we thought, all right, coming full circle, why don't we just start recording a podcast, an episode, something that kind of highlights what we do on a week to week basis in the NFL, and maybe we can highlight some of that. And then slowly but surely, people started listening. We started plugging it. We created an Instagram account. and people started to enjoy it. So we're like, all right, well, why don't we try to make something of this? So we started caring a little bit more about the brand, and we cared a little bit more about our in-depth research. We started to do more collabs, and that's when I thought, all right, you know what? If we're going to do this thing for real, I'm going to start listening to other fantasy football podcasts. And that's when I downloaded the TCK podcast, and I connected to Sky, and then I got connected to you. And so between myself, Eric, and Alex, who are my other two co-hosts, our mission is really to create sort of an entertaining show that isn't just fantasy football centric, but has a fantasy football underbelly. And because of that, we're able to not just talk about fantasy, we're able to talk about different things that people just care about in general, and then layer in fantasy football on top of that. And then the podcasting channel really came from more so myself. Back in my mid-20s, I just fell in love with podcasting. I just love listening to good podcasts. I had a long commute to work. And, and anybody that has long commutes just knows that, a good podcast helps make that time go by a lot fucking quicker. So I just thought, you know what, it would be pretty cool to maybe just create something on my own and see where it goes from there.
Yeah, so I have a couple questions regarding the league, and then sort of another question on top of that. So,
sure.
Well, you said the Drew Brees guy did not win. That was my one question to start. I was like, did he win? The return on investment, was that great? Or
no.
How did that? You don't have to say how much he actually won and stuff, but
he didn't win anything. He made it to the semifinals and then got bounced out. But that's the thing, man. Like, you can be as smart as you want in fantasy football, and there are some there's some ROI, some return on investment with respect to how much time you invest in researching. But dude, when it comes to playoffs, you need some fucking luck. And
sure.
Anybody that's ever won, look, they're not as good as they say they are. there is luck. There's luck that goes into it. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we can just use the TCK league, for example. No one got hurt on my team, and I can't control that, but that's ultimately my third flex, if you play a lot of flex spots, was just as good as the other guy in the championship, his RB2. So it just kind of worked out. So yeah, I like that you said that. There's two things that more on the league. So do you start a full 20 plus players, or how does the layout sort of work, and how many players you start and all that?
Yeah. So we start one quarterback, we start one running back, one wide receiver. Then we have two flex spots, wide receiver or running back. Then we have a tight end. Then we have a super flex.
Yep.
So that's where the super flex you can add another quarterback, tight end, wide receiver, running back. Then we have one kicker, one defense. We have, backups for each of those roster spots. And then we play we have three defensive players on our bench. You play two.
Okay. So, I mean, I'm not familiar with how defensive scoring, obviously it's however you make it, but do you see that leveling out the draft board in any way? Maybe, I don't know.
Oh, yeah.
Stephon Gilmore, I would think is probably pretty good last year. How high would his ADP be if you knew that was going to happen last year?
Yeah, you'd probably draft Stephon Gilmore somewhere in the 8th or 9th round.
That's insane. That's crazy. Yeah. So that's prime QB and tight end. So that's interesting. I've been a part of 32 team leagues in hopes to make it realistic and make it really a lot of depth on the team, but it's never I've ultimately left the league. So I can't keep up with the fifth receiver because it's not realistic in a sense.
No.
So yeah, I love that approach to it. So how long has that league been going on?
We've been doing this league so a little bit similar to your journey. I know that you and I have had conversations. You started somewhere back in 6th grade. So I didn't necessarily start playing fantasy football until maybe I was in a high school student or somewhere in college. But my father started this league in about 25 years ago. Or maybe even 25 years ago. It's 2020 now. So 1995. Put it this way, they were drafting Emmitt Smith and Barry Sanders and Dante Culpepper, and Randy Moss had just come into league in I think it was 97 or something of that nature. That's the people that they were drafting. I would help my dad crunch the numbers from the USA Today. So there was no online internet posting the numbers. There was none of that. We'd have to go into the USA Today. We had this makeshift spreadsheet. I'd have to go in, help them do the math. I was I was doing my multiplication tables, and so I was learning a little bit through fantasy football stats. Yeah.
That's awesome.
I'd go in and help him with all that. And then, and every Wednesday, every Tuesday night, he'd have his friends over, and my mom would fucking make a cake or something for the guys, and they'd bullshit, but it'd be a loud Wednesday night. And it was just a lot of fun to be around. So, I always grew up with it. It happened every year for 25 years of my life. By the time I was just ready to join, I was like, all right, let's go. I'm ready to join this thing.
That's awesome. I would die if I had to get all my numbers like that instead of just going on to different websites. But that's great.
Yeah.
So the one thing with your podcast, I think I find that is unique because if you guys go on his podcast, you'll hear our interview probably before you hear this or whatever the case may be. You don't necessarily do like start sits and waivers. You might talk about players, but you're not posting start sits week one. And I think that's very unique and that we need that in the fantasy industry. So do you guys have conversations about like, why aren't we doing this? Or like you and your brothers, do you like know that this is your goal to not do that? Or kind of how is that sort of like brought up in a way?
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I think that was one of the, for me, that was one of the baselines that I didn't want to do. Actually, I didn't want to just be another podcast that just talks about starts and sits. And I think it was and again, it's a bit of a confluence of the environment that we grew up in, but the conversations and just the banter we would have between each other, because a lot of us are family, would kind of be funny and engaging, borderline insensitive, but for a listener, it's quite funny if you're listening to it.
Yep.
And to me, I thought, well, let's start there because that's different, right? At least what we can do is entertain people from a fantasy football perspective. And that's really what we're trying to accomplish, really, at the end of the day, is not just to give them the Matthew Berry analytics, stats, the stats and the starts and sits, for example. We really wanted to create a show that would almost run independently of fantasy football if it had to, right? So, for example, if the NFL season ceased to exist in 2020, my guess is that the Commish could still operate without football for a season. I think that's the ultimate goal. Now, underpinning all that is fantasy football. So yeah, we're gonna bust each other's chops over football, right? And that's just fun. That's what people do. We wanted to make it just like your draft with your boys. Like that's what the point of the episode or starting the podcast came to be. Now, interestingly enough, is as we've grown some steam, we also were like, hey, people are listening to us. Kind of the way Sky thought about this. He's like, people are listening to us. I think we have an authority, or we have a responsibility to actually maybe provide some real content here and there. And so, this off season, we've tried to do that, right? So we still have sort of that core banter. You go back to a lot of the episodes we produced in March, but then we also came out once for example, the CBA came out, me and Eric did a whole bunch of research right on the CBA, and we were like, and I'm online looking at Instagram and he's on Twitter, and we're watching these people and we're seeing all of this misinformation go around, and we're like, how are people getting this so wrong right now? Like they're missing all of the key points. Like people thought that that they were, what was it? There was one thing. It was like something, not the playoff structure. It was something else, but there was one thing that isn't going to be in effect to 2021. But it's happening.
The 17 games.
You're right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. The 17 games. People thought it was happening this season, and we're like, no, that's not right. Like it's not even close to being right. Which is kind of a big deal. Like if you're listening to people that say this type of stuff and they're saying that that's what's happening, that's wrong. So me and Eric were like, you know what, dude? Like let's just fucking grind out a bunch of research here and let's just drop an entire CBA episode. And we did that, and it felt pretty good. And we were like, you know what? And that's gotten a lot of hits for us on our podcast. So now I think what we're going to try to do is this in 2020. One of the things we're going to do, we have a couple of other plans, is obviously to layer in what we've currently been doing, but then still filter in a bit of our expertise. The more we learn, the more we grow, things like that.
Yeah, I think that's ultimately like why we talk about it all the time. You have to be unique, and like everyone has their one spot they might go to for start, sit, waivers, whatever the case may be. But that's why like your podcast or podcasts like you ultimately see the growth, because like I don't need to have context to listen to your podcast, but I needed to be week 7 to listen to week 7 start, sit. So that's why I think one, and it's very, I like to say, I don't like to be super professional about the way I sort of do podcasts, whatever the case may be. Yours is, I mean, no offense, not even close to professional. And that's why it's good. That's ultimately why I think people listen to it. Obviously you provide fantasy football, like context, whatever the case may be, but I love how you like this channel, for example, is fantasy football, then us. I love how
Hmm.
it's you, then fantasy football. I think it's a very unique way that people might not realize that's how you can create content. You don't have
Yep.
to be doing waiver wire start sits. And yeah, I think that's perfect. And I just love that for some reason. It stuck out to me right away. So
Awesome.
we mentioned your brothers. They're ultimately the co-host of your show. Do you ever bring on like league mates or whatever, anybody else to, besides like, we're going to go into your collaborations later that you've been doing, but
Sure.
is there anyone else that's ever been a part of the commish on like a higher end than just in the episodes?
Yeah. So outside of, let's say, the collabs that we've done, Eric is my cousin, and
Cousin, okay.
Yeah, Alex is my brother. The three of us are three co-hosts, and at any given time, you'll have all three of us on an episode, or there'll just be two of us. And then we'll pull in people from our fantasy football league again, because what we wanted to do was to create and record the real life experience of what we go through in
Mhm.
our home league to some extent. So, for example, one of our most popular episodes it is really just fucking chaotic. The whole episode. It's called, if anybody wants to go listen to it on the Commish podcast, it's called "Shut the Fuck Up, Jake," and it is a very heated and intense argument between one of our fantasy football, GMs, will call them managers, Brandon, and the other one, who's Jake, and they just get into this really sort of pointless argument over a fantasy football rule in our league. But dude, it was pretty intense, and I was there kind of mediating it, and it was funny. It was quite intense in the moment, but then when it was done, when we stopped recording, they kind of cooled off, and then they were like, "Oh, you want a beer?" And so like it was just like, it kind of just like went back to normal. It's just like a fucking like weird like juxtaposition of what I just heard 5 seconds ago.
That's
Um,
awesome.
yeah. So anyways, yeah. So we try to bring on people from the league itself. And again, I think we're trying to create characters in our universe that we are just surrounded by all the time. So that's definitely one position.
Is that so? Like with your league members, are they all cool with being on the podcast, or how does that like do you walk up to them like, hey, we're going to record a podcast of the meeting, or sort of how does that work in a sense?
Yeah, no, that's exactly what it comes down to. So, for example, again, a lot of it's because of these Wednesday night meetings. If there's ever a Wednesday night meeting when shit goes haywire, I'm like, guys, we got to talk about this on the pod. And a lot of them are like, all right, let's do it. And
That's
so,
awesome.
and so they want to rehash the fucking argument we had over an hour ago for another hour, late on like a Thursday or Wednesday night at like 10 o'clock at night, and they have no problem with it. So they just roll with it. Yeah.
That's awesome. That's the exact opposite of my friends. They would be like, I don't want to say scared, but they're not really into that type of thing. So that's very unique. I love that. That's yeah, ultimately separates you guys for sure. So we'll move into sort of the social media aspect of it. So obviously you have an Instagram and Twitter, and I don't know if you have a website or not. You can plug those right now, and then maybe talk about kind of what you do. Like, what's your favorite thing? You don't have to give away any of your secrets, but kind of like why what you do on Instagram to sort of keep the content flowing, or Twitter.
Yes. Yeah. So I control the Instagram account. Eric controls the Twitter account. Eric's been a fucking wizard at the Instagram account. I mean, I don't even know what our numbers are at. I think we're at like 1,700 followers at this
Mm-hmm.
point. But his ability to generate content that is interesting has been off the charts, and he's been doing a great job. Instagram typically has always been a little bit slower for any types of accounts. If you're doing it the sort of the correct way, it just takes a little bit longer. So we're obviously not at those numbers on Instagram. It could also just mean that I'm not that good. I don't know.
It takes time. It takes time.
Yeah, that's what I think. I work in marketing, so that's been my my understanding of the accounts. But no, yeah, dude, I think on Twitter it's just a different type of format where that you can produce and post and run polls and things are just right there for people to sort of digest. Instagram, you kind of have to search for it. You have to find it. You have to be sort of led to it to some degree. And so it takes a little bit longer. I think on Instagram, really our strategy for 2020 is to produce more short form videos.
Mm-hmm.
Utilizing IGTV, we've just started to do this. I think recently, within the past like maybe week and a half, 2 weeks, people digest videos. And I know Instagram's a picture based channel to some extent, which we've also totally revamped our overall branding in that aspect. I think 2019 we were just trying to get our feet under us. We started in like late August, right? It was like hot as balls. Like when we were doing recordings, like I didn't have any AC in my apartment.
Yeah.
Like it was pretty fucking miserable when we first started. So we really grinded it out. I think from 2020, we've learned all the things that we needed to get better at, including the overall brand concept. And from there, we were like, all right, these are the things that we need to improve on. Let's just do it. We don't have to talk about it. I don't want to announce that we've, for example, updated the logo itself. We've added components, not just sort of the Commish head, which has become a bit of an iconic thing, I think, at this point, but also, we've added sort of, this sort of cursive writing that flows into sort of saying the Commish. And so, what we're really trying to do in the end is build, not just build a podcast brand, but for me, and I've talked a bit about this on Sky's episode that we have had. We don't have the website just yet. We're working on it. We're building it in the background, so I'll be able to plug that at a later time. But I have not seen a fantasy football brand, going back to sort of like a problem to fix in the fantasy football community. I have not seen a fantasy football brand that I would want to spend my money on from a merchandise standpoint.
Okay.
And I think it's a huge market that can be capitalized on, I suppose might be the right word. But I just feel like fantasy football has so much to offer. Where's the merchandise? Like, where is there a brand that confidently represents people who really enjoy fantasy football, right? Where's the shirts? Where are the hats? Like, where are those things in the universe? And granted, of course, you're up against people who obviously wear their jerseys or their team hats. But to be fair, people invest more time in fantasy football, not on or players not on their teams, right? That they really enjoy, that they really love. So where is that brand that has that ethos of fantasy football, the players that they invest their time into, the banter that the podcast that we're trying to create has, the characters that, you can kind of relate to in your leagues? Where is all that? So to me, it feels missing. And that's one of the things that we're trying to tackle.
So, so you have your hats, I know. So does that mean you're going to be branding out sweatshirts, t-shirt, whatever the case may be? Because I think that's a very I don't want to say I neglect it, but I just don't know where to start with that or how to. Because that's a commitment, obviously. It's
huge.
You have to put money down into it. You have to make sure it's good quality. You have to
Yep.
ship it, whatever the case may be. So you have to. You can't just. It's not like you're just writing an article. You can't just post it on a website. You have to actually plan that out and whatever else the case may be. So how does that process? How long does that take? How did it kind of start, and where is it at now?
Yeah. So before I even talk about the thought of producing it for the Commish, let's say, I think there's a couple of characteristics that you need to sort of have in your, let's say, in your personal self, like in your being. Okay. And so what I mean by that is, so I've worked for startup based environments my entire life. I feel like to some degree I'm a bit of an entrepreneur. I've worked in sales. I've worked in marketing. I have 2 degrees in marketing. I live and breathe business. I really enjoy the human element of business. I like working and solving problems on a sort of a consultative level. I like building relationships with people in that sense. And so that sort of characteristic about me has always been there. That being said, I have a friend of mine who's also sort of like a business mind. He's actually my buddy Blake, who we've talked about. He's actually the one who works for VaynerMedia out with Gary Vaynerchuk. So he also sort of has that thought process as well. And him and I connected when we used to work for a marketing agency. And we've always thought about collabing together on some kind of business idea. But the one thing we've always said to each other is, whatever we decide to do, we need to be able to do it for the next 10 years.
Okay.
So whatever real business decision, not just podcasting, not to your point, and you are right, it's not just about writing articles where you can just produce it and be done with it.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm committing to is a vision for the next, let's say, 10 years of my life. And I really want to commit myself to building something that, again, like I just said, that creates an ethos of merchandise that represents fantasy football, that, again, I don't think exists yet. So you're right. So from that standpoint, it's not necessarily an oversight for people. I just don't think that most people think of committing themselves to something for 10 years. So,
for sure.
it's just a really difficult thing to commit to. But, I think I'm a bit older. I'm 30 years old. And so, I've gone through sort of that those 20-year-old something lumps that people go through, and they can be quite difficult. So if you've gone through enough of them, you get a good vision of how to map the world. And for me, this feels right because I'm very passionate about fantasy football. And as you learn in life, it's like, and Lukas, you mentioned this on our last episode that you and I did together, which is like, if you enjoy something, just fucking do it. Just go right in for it, dive into it, and just learn along the way. Now, will this happen for the next 10 years? Who knows? I have no idea. But that's how far out I'm thinking with respect to creating merchandise, because there are like little things and logistics that, are very difficult. I'm learning a lot of new things. Like, I am not trying to create a product line that's flimsy that I wouldn't want to buy. I want to create something that people feel good about. Like, I want them to wear this thing and feel good that this is a product that represents their overall joy with fantasy football, right? I mean, that's why we do it. We love fantasy football. It's like you love the camaraderie with your friends, you love watching the game, you love the competitiveness. It's all of that wrapped into one sort of brand, and I think that is something that I would like to conquer.
Yeah, and I think you guys, I mean, as of now, you guys do that. I think I go on your Instagram or Twitter and you're retweeting and posting on your story. People are taking their pictures with their hat on and their whatever else the comment would be, like, this is awesome, like, can't wait to rock this, whatever. And Sky wears his all the time or in the background when we record on his little shelf or desk, whatever it is. So yeah, I think you're definitely on the right track, and I'll probably have to get with you and maybe ask more dynamics and stuff of how that works. So that's definitely something that, now that you actually like think about it and you talk about it, like, even the footballers, like, for how big they are, like, you don't see anyone wearing their shirts or sweatshirts or whatever else the case may be. So that's definitely a unique way to think about it.
Yep.
Mentioned website coming, so we'll plug that. We'll talk about that at a later time. So
sure.
We'll intro into 2020 now. So you've already brought on some awesome guests, Sky, me, and then Edwin Poros, I think his last name, is a doctor. I think that is something that's very, very useful no matter when you're doing it. I think so. Nick, I work for him, back end stuff. He brought on Jesse Morse in March last year. And Jesse basically said, do not draft Todd Gurley. Do not draft AJ Green. Like, draft Dalvin Cook because he's fine. And I think Nick took that like, holy shit, like, you're actually right. Like, you know what you're talking about. I mean, think to last year, which player did good out of those three? Like, Dalvin Cook. So, like, that stuff does matter, but you have to have a certain level of, degree, but knowledge to tell people that. So I listened to that episode and it was fantastic, and I loved the hamstring part, I think, is what you hyped on the most, and that was on your Instagram, like a little clip, IGTV, you said. So how did you just reach out to him, and how did that kind of like, did you have to do a ton of research to keep up with him in a sense, or how did that kind of work?
Yeah, sure. No, so I really have to give credit to Eric on this. So Eric had connected with Edwin. It's really funny, when we started the Commish podcast in the Twitter account, Edwin had just started his Twitter account, and okay. Eric did a whole bunch of research on Edwin and his background, and they just connected early last year. And so Eric's just been building that relationship up, and what, it's funny, one of the things that really got us to want to get Edwin on, and we talked about this on one of our episodes, we were sort of joking about it, was that Edwin has in his profile, in his Twitter profile, he despises the use of the word injury prone. And for someone who's watched Keenan Allen go down, and Todd Gurley and whoever, and I sit there or AJ Green, if you've ever drafted AJ Green, you sit there and you listen, and you're like, how the fuck is a player not injury prone, right? And so you're like, what are you talking about, right? And so I know you're a medical expert, but what the hell are you talking about? What are you like? How is that how is it a possibility? So it was sort of a joke. It was sort of like, tongue in cheek kind of banter between me and Eric, but we were very serious about getting Edwin on, and so we reached out to him, and he absolutely wanted to collaborate with us. So there was a level of seriousness, but he's a super down to earth guy. I really encourage anybody at this point who's just kind of fluttering between sports, you're just trying to look for something to listen to or watch, definitely go check out our episode with Edwin, because he breaks everything down in a lot of different ways, both at sort of a meta level with player injury, but also we go into 4 specific players with AJ Green, Dalvin Cook, Evan Ingram, and Cam Newton with their injuries. And he breaks all of these things down. And, you know, for someone who, again, I think I'm much more inquisitive than I am trying to be like an authority in fantasy football to some extent, or in football. Like, I'm much more interested in learning about these types of things than actually trying to state my claim, you know, on something, or trying to be right. I could give a fuck if I'm right. Like, I want to be right, but I don't like, I'm not going to die on that hill. Right. So that episode, I think, came out very well. And to your point, yeah, like, we're trying to cut small snippets of Edwin talking about, you know, AJ Green, for example, and what it meant for his reconstructive fucking ankle, and why you really need to stay away from AJ Green in the first few rounds, despite, he's like, I don't care who is throwing the rock, don't draft AJ Green because there are bigger problems. So that's an example. And I thought he did just a great job with breaking that down.
So, like I said, it's a fantastic episode now, last month, whatever. So is that going to lead to more episodes, I'm assuming, or I don't know, like how did, like, I guess I'll go back to mainly him. So does he have his own channel by any means, or is he just like a independent fantasy football guy, if I want to claim it?
Yeah, no. So he's a little bit like you in a sense, where he collabs with different types of channels. Like, he's not like a staple on the Commish, but we have talked about having him back on multiple times, and he actually can't wait. Right. But he also, and I forget, again, I'd have to go back and listen to the episode, but he talks about who he collabs with, but he's on a lot of different shows, ones that we know of, and he goes in and acts as a special guest on their behalf, and then, you know, dives into, you know, what he can on the fantasy football side via Twitter. And again, like, you have to think about this from his perspective. Like, he does what he can. He doesn't have like his own channel, like his own podcast channel or anything, and it's because, you know, he's literally in the middle of his boards right now. He's trying to finish up his degree. So you know, and you know how much work goes into creating podcasts and generating content and analysis. It's a lot of fucking work, and to do that on top of being a student, on top of like him actually having to work a full-time job, it's a little bit too much. So I think, you know, maybe in time he'll get there, but for now I think he enjoys what he's doing.
That's awesome. I'll probably have to reach out to him more. I have no clue about any like medical anything. So any player that is injury prone, I just stay away from it. I mean, it's the safe way to play it, but I don't take big hits when that does happen. So that's awesome.
Fair.
You don't have to release any maybe guests you're bringing on, but do you guys have plans to obviously collab and stuff, but do you have like bigger plans, bigger guests maybe you're trying to reach, or kind of how is it going to look from now until the season starts for you guys?
Yeah, so, well, we definitely want to bring on other guests. I'm sure, you know, myself, you, Sky, will do some breakdown episodes. You know, we'll definitely have Edwin back on. I've already gotten a few DMs from sort of our Instagram collab groups that we've had, and a bunch of guys sort of want to collab with us there. But one of the things that I'm very excited for that's coming up soon is we're gonna be doing an episode with a few of our fans. And that's an element of the podcast I think we're going to start to explore more. So people that have been listening to us that really love the type of show that we're producing, who are also, you know, commissions in their own rights, and they have all these stories, they want to contribute. So it's like, you know what, man, as far as I'm concerned, the fans are the fourth co-host of the shows. And I'd like to explore that route. So we're going to do something this weekend that I hope to launch next week with a few fans of ours on a collab episode, and hopefully it's a good one.
And if I remember right, you guys are strictly on podcasts, right? You don't have a YouTube channel or Twitch or whatever the case may be.
No, we do have a YouTube channel now. Yep. So if you just type in the Commish Fantasy Football Podcast, I think it's that. I'll plug it in the show notes if it's not. But yeah, I know we are on YouTube. Pretty much anything that I try to post on Instagram, so the short form videos will be there, and then just the long form podcast episodes are also there right now.
Okay, awesome. So I think that's something that are those shows with the fans going to be like fantasy football breakdowns, or kind of what are those going to kind of be like? If you know, I guess you might not know yet.
Well, yeah. So it's funny. Yeah, I'll just tell you the show that we're going to produce. You know, hopefully this weekend. So we have two guests, two fans of ours. again, we try to incorporate things that people care about and also, you know, what our fans might care about and layer that into fantasy football. So we're going to try and produce an episode where we talk about the stock market, like the actual stock market, because apparently these guys love stocks. If anybody happens to care about the stock market, you would know that it's the right time to buy because no one knows what the hell's going on. Not to say that it's a, you know, it's not a good thing that any of this is happening, but it also doesn't mean you need to squander, you know, the chance to, you know, help yourself out in sort of this glim, you know, environment that we're in right now. Anyways, the point is that these guys like the stock market, as do myself, Eric, and Alex. We're all on Robinhood, so we'll plug that. We're basically gonna all do research on players in fantasy football and compare them to actual stocks and how those stocks have performed.
That's what.
Yeah.
That's what we're trying to do. That's
Yeah.
cool though. I think that's an aspect that I think a lot of channels, brands are missing in a sense. So we started a Discord chat. We'll put that link will be down below. But that's very limited to like we do mock drafts. We'll give them the link. They'll ask us like, should I do this trade in dynasty leagues? And we want to kind of take that to the next level. So I think that's something that you can really do whatever you want. Like obviously you said you're going to talk about the stock market probably for who knows how long you'll do it for, but that's something that like you could even just live stream on YouTube once a week.
Yep.
And I don't know, it's just content. And I think that's very unique. So I think that's something that's really cool. I'm surprised a lot of fans are like brave enough, you could say, to like reach out. I feel like that's something that's like when they're your fans, they don't think to like, I could do this too. Like, I mean, that's what we talked about in our episode. Like anyone can do it. So I think that's really cool that they actually reached out to do that.
Yeah.
With your brand, no one's perfect. So I'm just gonna say, where would you want to see changes come 2020? If you guys have talked about that, or where do you think you guys can really grow to the next level?
Yeah. I don't even, you know, I feel like we're already biting off more than we can chew at this point. I think the one thing that we can probably do better at is getting more. And again, I think this is more a matter of time as opposed to us not necessarily executing correctly. But I think what I'd like to do is get more established segments in our shows. So for example, right, I've heard a couple of good podcasts outside of fantasy football where, you know, there would be a certain episode that would drop on Fridays and it would be called a certain thing. Right now, if you were to tune into the Commish Fantasy Football Podcast, like there is no rhyme or reason as to why the interview would drop on this day, right? So we're going to be doing back-to-back interviews with myself and Sky and, you know, myself and you, Lukas, right? But then after that, we're going to drop an episode with the fans, right? And like, what's that going to be called, right? So I'd like to create something where we segment things a little bit more cleaner, right? A little bit the way Joe Rogan does. So if anybody that knows Joe Rogan, he has like, he brings on a whole slew of guests, but he actually categorizes them into MMA and then normal guests. And so people who don't care about MMA don't have to listen to it. And people that care about the normal guests can listen to it, right? And that's kind of the bucket that I fall into. Although I do appreciate MMA and I watch it from time to time, I don't really care too much about listening to Joe Rogan's MMA guests. But I do find it very interesting when he brings on like Neil deGrasse Tyson or Bernie Sanders or Elon Musk. Like that to me is fascinating, right? And so that's what I want to listen to. So yeah, I think we can do a bit better in that aspect. Of course, like you know, on the merchandise side, you know, we just have to get our designs correct. We have to get the website built, which is a lot of things. Like there's a lot of tasks and a lot of small objectives that we just have to keep building on. I wouldn't necessarily say from a strategic standpoint that we want to change anything. I feel like overall we're in a pretty good place. We're much further along than I ever expected we would be at the beginning of 2019. So that's I'm grateful for that.
Yeah, that's ultimately the good thing. I think I'm in the same boat right now. Obviously, we're starting this new channel, the website, trying to put together. We have a calendar, very very subject we have it like laid out for the summer, but like obviously we say like this is not set. But we want to keep like the Monday, Wednesday, Fridays dynasty videos or whatever the case may be, because I think that's something that adds on that component of what attaches the audience to you. Because I mean, I don't know if our audience listens to every episode, but maybe they find the one dynasty video a week in season, the one they like to listen to. But that's fine. Obviously, they're still your audience in that sense. So I think that's something that's tough to do. I will say that it's very tough to stick to the schedule because maybe stuff happens, whatever else the case may be. But I think once you can keep that and keep it set in stone, it's something that, I mean, I guess we'll find out will really grow. But yeah, I think it's fantastic. And I think I was glad you said that you, not surprised, but you were happy that you felt like you got farther than you actually thought you would get at this point, just to kind of show the hard work that you guys have been putting in. Because you guys, your Twitter does stand out to me. I always tag you guys because you guys always respond and you're always answer like you do. You are on there. I'm on Twitter a lot, but you guys like collab a lot more on Twitter. That's something that I kind of want to start doing. It's just tough to keep track of all that.
Sure.
For sure.
Yeah. I have to give credit. I have to give credit to Eric for that. He's been fucking killing it. We've done a couple of like live Twitter streams recently. I think we're gonna do a bit more of those. A lot of times we're just like drinking and bullshitting. So that's kind of what you're gonna get from that perspective. But but they're fun. People can tune in if they want to. But I really have to give credit to Eric for that. He's done a great job.
Yeah, that's awesome. He's doing a good job. So with that, what is one thing maybe you found now or last year that is the hardest thing about content creation or like developing ideas, or what is the one thing that's the hardest for you or maybe the overall brand?
Yeah, I think there's because we're all family, and I'm gonna be a little bit transparent here. Because we're all family, we have the tendency to know our buttons, right? We definitely highlight those on the show, and it's funny to like listen to and watch. But there are moments outside of the show and outside of our just the collection of information and ideas that we have where people can get a little antsy as to some of the decision making that's happening, and there's definitely a growth curve that we are learning about each other individually, right? So we're learning about each other on a different type of level. It's like Alex is my brother, Eric is my cousin. I've known them literally for my entire life. I've never worked with them in this capacity ever in my entire life. So So I'm learning so much about each of them, and we're learning our flaws, we're learning our strengths in real time. And there's a perspective that we're each gaining from each other that at times there can be friction, right? And understanding how to handle friction is a really important trait in life in general. And so, yeah, I would say that it's difficult, but it's like a good kind of difficult. It's like you need that friction to produce good things, as long as you know how to handle the friction. People lose it when they don't know how to handle the friction, right? In normal life, like they just lose their cool, and you see that. That's not good. You don't want to do that. So we're learning every day. It's always a learning journey. I think it's more about personality and character development within each other. It's funny because that's really all so far that we have in the podcast. Like that's what we're developing. It's within ourselves. So that's probably the hardest thing.
That's awesome. Cause not that me and Sky are like, we don't know each other for that long, but it's very like unique to you guys. Cause I mean, like me and Sky are just texting, maybe calling once a week, whatever the case may be, but we're not like seeing each other, do research, edit the videos, whatever else the case may be. So that's very, I can't imagine not many other podcasts have that. So I think it's very unique for you guys.
Yeah.
I'll just give you one example. It's like a low key pet peeve that I even have at this point. It fucking drives me crazy. So I got Madden right at the house, right? Yep.
Let's say we have a 3:00 episode. We're gonna we've all agreed 3:00. Okay. Alex and Eric will get on the sticks. They're gonna start playing Madden. They'll play fucking 5 games, and it's like 3:30. And at this point, I'm like, what the fuck are we doing? Like, are we gonna record this episode? And they at this point they know they're getting under my skin, and so they'll just keep riding that until like 3:45. By the time the episode starts, I'm fucking heated. Like I'm already pissed off, and I just wanted to go into like the episode nice and cool and calm and collected. Things like that. That's that's a pet peeve type of thing, but that's the type of shit that. And I'm sure they have their bit on me, so but that's
that's awesome that you said that, because I'm the exact same way. I have like calendars planning out every single thing I'm doing. I mean I play video games. It's not like saying that video games are bad, but like I make sure that's the one, like I don't like wasting time. I think that's a big thing that like, not that's a waste of time. I'm not saying it is, but like I want to do, I don't know, like I guess if I'm all in on this, I'm making sure this is done before I do that in a sense. So that's actually funny you said that, because that's exactly how I feel sometimes too.
Yep.
So you're contributing to our draft guide or the draft guide for the channel, not necessarily our draft guide. Is there any like sort of I don't want to say paid plans or anything, but like any bigger plans outside of just like videos and Twitter and stuff, like a draft guide or maybe a Patreon or anything that you guys are planning on doing?
Not from a paid standpoint. I'm almost really anti like sponsors and really anti getting paid at this point. Like to me, I just want to create a good platform, a good basis of content that people trust and they understand that we're in it just for exactly what we say we're in it for.
Yep.
I have no interest in making money at this point. I'm fortunate enough to still have a job in the midst of all this sort of, all the stuff with the coronavirus. I'm able to work from home. So, yeah. And it's funny because Eric and Alex Alex and Eric are both on the same page as me. We don't even really talk about it that much. We both know that it's not something we're interested at this point. The one thing, again, like I mentioned earlier about the merchandise, we are selling merchandise. Like that is, if there's any, revenue production that's happening, it's going to be, selling Commish merchandise.
Okay. That's awesome. I was just wondering if I must have missed something on Twitter. There's an announcement or something like that. So yeah, this is awesome. So we, just like you guys do, our rapid fire questions or our ending. I don't know what we're going to call them. I don't want to steal your name or anything. So we'll start off. You're a Patriots fan. I guess we didn't intro that. You live 45 minutes away from the stadium. You're from Boston area.
No, it's funny. I'm actually from a city called Fall River. It's actually closer to Providence than to Boston. It's actually in the southern part of Massachusetts. So Foxborough, where Pat Stadium or Gillette Stadium sits kind of between Boston and Fall River.
Okay. All right.
Yep.
So with that, your favorite Patriots player of all time?
It's Tom Brady. I'm already ready to buy a fucking Buccaneers jersey.
Okay.
But let's just say outside of Tom Brady, crazy. I know a lot of people think of him as a Jet, but Curtis Martin was a fucking beast of running back for the Patriots for a time being. When I grew up, I remember him. I just remember really loving watching Curtis Martin run.
Awesome. And then I guess Curtis Martin might be kind of this answer to this question, but your favorite non-Patriots player of all time?
So I think I'd answer this with Sky. For me, and you're gonna love this. For me, it was Terrell Davis.
Heck yeah.
Back in the late '90s and early 2000s when the Broncos had their runs, man. Terrell Davis he was my boy.
That was my dad's favorite player. He had a Terrell Davis jersey and pictures and all that stuff hanging up.
So good.
Favorite fantasy player of all time? You can break it down by position or however you feel. If you have multiple in the same position, but who did you ride on in the however long you've been playing fantasy for?
Yeah. So Russell Wilson's my man. That guy led me to 3 back-to-back championships in my home league. Yep.
All right.
Yep. Just straight up luck. Those are the years where you had Marshawn Lynch. This was all like the Legion of the Boom years, like back in 2015, 16, 17. Yeah, 2016, 15, 16, 17. That guy is money late in the season.
I'm trying to think of his receiver's name and it just slipped my mind. Who is? Oh gosh, this is gonna be. I'm a fantasy football guy. I don't even know his name.
I just watched him throw touchdowns. We'll throw it in the show notes.
Yeah, it'll come to me. So I'll just put favorite food on there because I'm a big food guy. So do you have a favorite food or maybe a type of food or anything?
Dude, a lot of good seafood here in Massachusetts.
Oh, yeah,
a lot of good seafood. I'm Portuguese. That's my ethnicity. A lot of good Portuguese food. Portuguese food and seafood. I'll stick with those.
And do you like to cook? I love to cook, so that's why I was
big cooker. So I've actually lived a lot outside of Massachusetts for my life. When I was 19, I did an internship down in DC. I lived out in California for about 3 to 4 months, and then I did my master's degree out in France for a year. So I've lived a lot in different places, including different countries. And I've had to learn how to cook. So, yeah, cooking is a thing.
You've had a lot more food culture than the middle of Iowa, I bet, for sure.
Yeah, I would say so.
Before we go into the final two, we will say you asked me this, and I just thought about this. So name one player at each position that you're going to target, no matter ADP or however you want to do it. Name one player at every position that if you had 10 teams, you'd have them on all 10 teams.
Yeah, so I've always been a big Josh Allen fan. Love Josh Allen. I'm targeting Josh Allen from a QB standpoint. Running back, dude, I don't know why I'm falling in love with Derrick Henry, but I love Derrick Henry. Back in October, I called that he was going to have a monster year. Again, I don't care about being right, but it's awesome when you are right. When
Oh
Taylor
yeah.
Lewan came back into that line, I said, you have to buy Derrick Henry right now. And sure as shit, a couple weeks later, once that offensive line got their act together, he just became Derrick Henry. So I don't know. I feel like a sense of I don't know.
I mean,
Elite.
nothing changed when he lost Conklin, but they're gonna draft someone. So like,
That's what I'm saying.
I get what you're saying. I was off him last year, and then me and Sky did a mock, and we took him in round 1 because I was sitting there like, oh gosh, like,
Yeah.
am I gonna have to choose between him, whatever 1,900 rushing yards or whatever he had last year? But yeah, he's a beast.
Mm-hmm.
I'm interested to see if they do get a top tackle or whatever the case may be, kind of where people rank him, because I don't know if he is a tier 1 running back, but I don't know if people think he's a tier 1 running back. So I love that.
And it's crazy too because people don't think he's a tier 1 running back to some degree because he doesn't catch a lot of balls. But dude, when he catches the ball, he runs for 80 yards. Like
Yeah, he had like an 80-yard screen pass the first game of the year. Yeah, I get that's
exactly.
funny.
So like
That's funny.
like you're right. He doesn't catch a lot of balls, but when he does catch the ball, he goes for like 50 yards. Like so that I don't know. It's kind of you have to weigh that out.
Yeah.
From a wide receiver standpoint, all right. So I feel like I missed on Diggs last year. I drafted him pretty high, and he was really streaky, obviously with the Vikings. I'm gonna target Diggs again this year. I'm gonna give him a second shot. I think on Buffalo with Josh Allen opposite John Brown, Cole Beasley, the running game. I think he's gonna be pretty dynamite on that offense. Broken plays I think are gonna help him a lot, and Josh Allen's gonna find him down the field. So I'm gonna say Stefon Diggs, and then tight end. Again, I don't know what it is, man, but I love Evan Ingram. I know he gets hurt, and I went through this on the Edwin episode, but fuck, man, if this guy can stay healthy, he's got like George Kittle, Travis Kelce potential in him. And for me, I look at the environment, and I know Sky loves sort of the environment v. the player comparisons. I think that environment in New York is looking fairly good this year with all the weapons around Daniel Jones. I think the 1 year under Daniel Jones's belt is going to be enough to make that offense maybe top 10.
And here's the thing with that. I think you say you like him, but you cannot project injuries. Like if you like him, you have to do it. You have to.
I know. You gotta commit.
Because I mean, okay, anybody could get injured. We could have the same conversation with George Kittle in 2 years if he gets injured back-to-back years. You can't project that. So I think I'm glad you said that because, I mean, we've seen his fantasy. I've had him like his rookie year and stuff when he was that good. So obviously, like I said, I'm sort of off the injury-prone players, or sort of off the, I don't know, like the AJ Green, the Amari Cooper, like just because I just feel like it's how I play it. But yeah, I love that you said that. Now on the flip side, the players you will not be taking on any of your 10 teams.
Yeah, so quarterback, I'm not taking Jameis Winston. Like I can't, I just can't do it. Like I can't watch him play. I'm sorry. There's just something about his style of play. I just feel like he doesn't. I can't stand watching players that don't look like they're not thinking. Like he does. He's throwing the, like, I don't know. Like there's just something about that style. It doesn't work for me. So definitely not drafting Jameis Winston. From a running back standpoint, dude, I'm not drafting Joe Mixon. I can't do it. I cannot draft.
Come on.
I cannot draft Joe Mixon. I drafted him this year. I drafted him over Dalvin Cook. I'm not even saying that's the reason why I'm not going to draft him this year. I don't think that the environment in Cincinnati is going to be enough. I just don't. I don't care Joe Burrow or not. I don't think AJ Green's going to be back. They still have a second-year head coach who had a fucking terrible year overall. He's
not a head coach by any means to me.
That's what I'm saying. Exactly. Like he's not a head coach. I don't think Joe Burrow is going to have quite the season that everyone thinks he's going to have. And then they still have the offensive line problem. So, yeah, I mean, he might have a bit of an increase in production, but again, the best 2 games that he had were at the end of the season when everyone who had Joe Mixon was out of the playoffs. So no Joe Mixon for me. Wide receiver, dude, I don't know. There's so many good wide receivers. Like I don't know who I wouldn't want to have. Like maybe Amari Cooper because he doesn't really play that much. Like, he kind of plays, but he's kind of soft. So who knows when he's going to play? Like,
Yeah.
last year, like, he definitely could have played in New England. He just didn't. Like, he just didn't.
Yeah, I never take him just because this happens every single year and people seem to think it's going to change for whatever reason. But players don't change. When you get paid that much money, you stick to what you believe in. So I agree.
Yeah. Okay, and then tight end, man. It's like, you get like four. I don't know. Dude, I don't know about OJ Howard. I don't know about him. I'm still not sold. I don't know about him.
I don't want to there needs to be more analysis than Tom Brady's the quarterback because, yeah, Tom Brady targeted Gronk, but that's because Gronk was his number one receiver. OJ Howard's his, I mean, you could say wide receiver 3, but to me, Cameron Brate is, I don't want to say better, but
he's better. No, he is. He's just better.
Yeah, I don't want to make a prediction now because I need to do more research revolved around it. But I don't know because who's to say they don't run a Patriots offense and go 2 tight ends? Who's to say they don't run an all vertical scheme? I don't know. I have a feeling though he's going to be right back to right around where his ADP was last year due to people like to play narratives in fantasy football. I'm sure you realize that. I think it's going to happen again with however they approach that narrative for sure.
Yeah, dude, I'll just say this, man. Everyone wants to make the comparison what Brady did with a 2 tight end set. Again, even with Aaron Hernandez and Gronk earlier in their careers, but then with Gronkowski directly, and everyone's claiming OJ Howard to be a Gronk type figure. Let me just give you sort of the Patriots perspective in a sense. All right, first off, Tom Brady is a marksman when it comes to throwing balls, especially short routes, okay? Which is where a lot of tight ends make their fucking money, okay? And then by short routes, I mean they catch balls maybe 10, 15 yards, but that's where they basically man out linebackers and corners and people that are targeting them, defensive backs. The thing is Brady only threw it where Gronk could catch it, and those weren't in the best ideal locations.
Yeah.
Everyone forgets how good Gronk was as a receiver. He was great, and it wasn't just because he had huge hands. The guy had an IQ through the roof. He knew where to be, when the ball was going to be there, and he knew exactly how to catch Tom Brady's passes. Can OJ Howard be that person? I don't know yet. So I'll just leave it at that.
Another question are you a believer that Tom Brady favors slot receivers? Because I have a side to this. Are you Chris Godwin's good. He's going to be good in fantasy, but say Chris Godwin didn't break out last year. Would this be the Chris Godwin breakout year just because Tom Brady favors slot guys, or are you kind of
No, I don't buy that narrative. I don't buy that Tom Brady favors slot guys. I think Tom Brady is playing chess when other people are playing checkers. So so if the slot's open, which a lot of times it is, then he's going to find that guy. He'll go through his progressions better than anybody in the NFL. And a lot of times the slot guy is not being covered because it's 5 yards, it's 6 yards, it's 7 yards. And most NFL teams are we'd rather die by death of 1,000 paper cuts than, a fucking, sledgehammer to the head. That's how we're going to die today. And that's why Julian Edelman's, the Chris Hogan's of sorts, Danny Amendola was a perfect example of this. They made their fucking money literally in the NFL because of that.
Yeah.
That's just how he plays the game. Tom Brady, I don't think cares really all that much about stats. He's gonna find the open guy. If Chris Godwin's open, he's getting the ball.
Yeah, my thought process is everyone's well, Julian Edelman was so good because he played the slot. Julian Edelman was his best receiver. Obviously he's gonna throw it to his best receiver, and he just happened to be playing in the slot. So that's where
he's also
I just wanted to ask.
He's also a big trust guy. He will go off of his progression even if you're open if he doesn't think you can catch the fucking ball. Go ask Philip Dorsett or even N'Keal Harry at times, guys that were 1 year wonders, not even wonders, they were 1 year flops because Tom Brady just couldn't trust them. He just couldn't catch the ball.
Yeah, I thought I'd ask because I feel like it's a narrative per se,
sure,
just
sure.
the OJ Howard one.
Sure.
All right, a couple more questions here. Late round QB or nah?
Depends on the league I'm playing in. If I was in my home league, I'll give you an example because we play the QB Premium League. Patrick Mahomes is going number 1 overall. Not even Christian McCaffrey.
Okay.
That's how much Patrick Mahomes means in our league, right? And Lamar Jackson might be number 2. That's how much these guys mean in our league. And then it might be Christian McCaffrey. So it depends on the league. In our league, quarterbacks go. You might see 3 or 4 quarterbacks go in the first round in our league. That's just kind of how it is. But then after that, what's funny? I've always been trying to get a great quarterback early, but I might try a different approach this year. There's a lot of good quarterbacks I think people can get late. And for example, like my cousin Eric drafted, and I think a lot of people did this, drafted Dak Prescott like in the 13th, 14th round last year, maybe last quarterback overall.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of those quarterbacks right now. The top 20 quarterbacks in the NFL are all pretty good. They're all pretty good.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, I'm the same way too. We'll probably break that down in different episodes. You asked this question to me, and I really liked it. Jersey swap with one player. Who would it be?
Yeah. So it's funny. I did this with Sky. My answer was Julio Jones. Love Julio. But dude, let me throw another name. I love Russell Wilson. I already told you the guy won me 3 championships in fantasy. Oh, yeah. I got to go with Russell Wilson. Yeah, he's a boss.
That's awesome. Even with his new haircut or whatever is going on there,
he can do whatever he wants.
I love it. And then the final question: give me your Super Bowl, AFC, NFC teams, and then the overall MVP, not the Super Bowl MVP.
Yeah. So, who I want, I'd like to see the Titans versus the Arizona Cardinals in Super Bowl 55. And I think the Cardinals end up winning, sending Larry Fitzgerald off. Started sending Larry Fitzgerald off with his signature Super Bowl victory. That would be awesome. I know everybody wants Drew Brees and Tom Brady. Well, you don't want Tom Brady, but you want Drew Brees. I think I want Larry Fitzgerald. But who do I think? I think it'll probably be the Ravens. Probably the Ravens Seahawks.
Okay, I like that. That's
Ravens Seahawks. Maybe. I'm always flimsy about the Seahawks. They're the kind of team that always look good at the beginning of the season, and as the season goes, you start to see their weaknesses, and you're like,
yeah. God. They never since the Legion of Boom, they just never built a good enough roster to actually like make a run at it. And you see that like they had to bring in Marshawn Lynch to play running back for him.
I know it's so terrible.
It's just and then your regular season MVP.
Regular season MVP. I'm going to say Saquon Barkley. I think he fucking tears it up this season.
That'd be great. I want a running back to win it. Here's the thing, though. If he wins it, say he wins it, whatever the case may be, people are going to be so mad that McCaffrey did not win it last year. Like, you know what I'm saying? Because they're going to compare, like, the stat lines, whatever else the case may be. But I want it to happen one of these times because I feel like a lot of quarterbacks I'm not saying they are not deserving. Obviously, I think Lamar was deserving. But I think sometimes it's just like, quarterback always wins, so they just throw it to some guy that maybe was on a good team or whatever the case may be, like to an extent. So I like that a lot.
Yep. I think Saquon has a Barry Sanders like season, so they're gonna look at Barry Sanders stats compared to Saquon stats and be like, how do we not give it to this guy? But then again, I think you're right. I mean, Patrick Mahomes throws for 45 touchdowns, and you're like, all right, let's give it to Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah, he's gonna get it even if they throw the ball on 85% of the plays.
Exactly. Okay. Yeah. we digress.
This was awesome, man. I'm super glad you decided to, interview me, and then we just returned the favor. So take this time to plug whatever you want, drop links, anything you want to talk about.
Yeah, sure, man. Again, I really appreciate it, dude. It's always fun joining, Sky and yourself for any types of collabs. So yeah, anybody that's interested, we're always looking for more listeners. Just again, building our user base, just getting people into the Commish universe in a sense. You can find us at the Commish Fantasy Football Podcast on Apple, Spotify, and Google Play. And then you can also find us on Instagram and Twitter at the Commish FFP. So it's at the Commish Fantasy Football Podcast FFP.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you so much for joining us. I'm sure you'll be on, I'll be on both channels, TCK, all that. So for both of us, we are out of here.
All right. Thanks, bud. Take care.
Yep. You too.